Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to Mentor Monday. Mentor Monday is your weekly microdose of encouragement, inspiration, and miracle grow on your potential as a coach. As we always love to do, what's always important to us is to connect with you. So you see that down there, do us a huge favor and let us know that you're here. Tell us where you're joining us from, what you're excited about, where you feel life and momentum in your life. I hope you're doing amazing over here in California, where we specifically where we live. We don't really get a whole lot of rain, and we don't get a whole lot of cold. It just sounds terrible. It's pretty much sunny every day and around 60s or 70s or something like that. But it's actually gotten to almost freezing in the last 24 hours, and it's raining right now. It's just like, wow, weather. It's a crazy thing. So do us a huge favor. Make sure that you say hello to us again. Tell us where you are joining us from and what you're excited about, where you feel life and momentum. Joan's joining us from Bakersfield. Welcome, Joan. Again, it's just as you are making it in, make sure that you say hello to us. We're going to jump in to what our content is for today. Actually, what we've been doing the last couple of weeks is talking about this whole idea of coaching the COVID funk. And what do we really mean by coaching the COVID funk? Well, here's what I'm really talking about when it comes to the COVID funk. If you're unaware of what we actually mean by that, what we're really talking about is in life, there's always transition. And when I say there's always transition, really what I mean is that there's always a change that's happening in life, and either we initiate the change or something outside of us initiates that change. And that transition could involve work, it could involve family, it could involve moving, lots of different kinds of things. Like, so there's positive transition where we've actually made a choice for something different in our life. And then there's negative transition that we don't usually work with very well. All transition really follows a curve that looks like this. And on that far line that you see, if this is an XY axis, you see state of being. So what we're talking about is where someone is mentally and emotionally in their thinking process. And the other thing is time. So that what we're really talking about, anything even that negative that's happened in your life, if we looked even in somebody's life, they lost a loved one or something like that, what we're really talking about is that state of being obviously drops, but that over time, a person begins to get things together, think about things, process things in a really healthy way to where they're actually moving forward. And the best kind of processing in my mind, that this time period isn't taking you 5-10 years, that we're actually processing things in a really healthy way in real time as much as we possibly can. So that what you're really looking at in a transitional curve right now with regard to COVID is really that first part is actually denial. And honestly, there's some people who are still actually living in denial with regard to all of this stuff, pretending none of this stuff is happening and the world's going to completely go back to where it was before and we're just waiting on this thing. And then there's some people who have completely checked out in this entire process as well. What's happened past denial, you want to say that second part is acceptance. It's kind of like a reality check that happens. This is where we live with COVID funk, and it's where so many people right now are completely getting stuck and are kind of non-existent. How are they going to move forward? And unless we help them move forward, maybe some of you get stuck in this process, but well, honestly, a lot of you in this process, because you've already developed self-awareness, a lot of you are coaches or aspiring coaches. This is something that you're thinking about in real time. You're self-editing all the time with regard to your life. And many of you are actually doing better now than you were 2 years ago before any of this stuff even surfaced, right? But not everybody is doing that. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are stuck right here. And so how do we actually move someone to the point of where they actually accept it? And when I say acceptance, it's not saying, this is my lot in life and this is the way it's always going to be. No, it's not saying this is the way it's always going to be. It's saying we look at right now where we are at and looking at the opportunities that exist so that we begin to problem solve and build the life that we can now. In the same way that if someone lost a loved one, doesn't mean that their life is over, but some people, their life is over and they never, or they have such a wound in their life that they're not able to go on after that. What we want to help people do is to face the reality is that some of these things are really painful. Some of these things really suck. Some of those things really, really hurt in life. And we understand that, but it's been being able to grab in this moment, because if you think in any moment in your life, the greatest change that has happened in your life, greatest transformation that has happened in your life has all been in resistance. It hasn't been just in a free fall, like everything's just kind of like easy and there's no resistance. It's basically just like gravity that's kind of getting you there, right? It's something changed in your life, positive or negative, and the growth that happened in your life actually happens with resistance. It's the pushback. It's like going to the gym. If you never lift heavy weights, you're going to look exactly the same and you probably won't break a sweat. There's plenty of people that up to COVID weren't really breaking a sweat in life. And now they aren't working with the resistance like they really could. And so what we're trying to do is help our clients get unstuck, look at the resistance that's actually happening in their life, and to be able to work with it so that they can actually develop the kind of life that they want. But bend down, grab my trusty clicker, and let me say hello to a couple of people that have popped in really quickly. Let's see. I want to say hello to Bernie from Westchester, New York, Tashi, who's joining us from North Carolina. Looking forward to the holidays. Me too. Oh, I got to say this. We do a white elephant Christmas party every year. It's been a tradition for many years. So we have these people who, even if we don't see them that many times during the year because they're busy in their own lives, they always want to be invited to the party. And I got all of my white elephant gifts in. I wish I could tell you what they were, but after we get past the Christmas party, which is actually going to be this Saturday, what I will do is that next week I'll actually show you some of the white elephant things. They're just so funny. So anyway, that's one of our highlights. Tanya, who's joining us from Virginia Beach. Beautiful. Awesome. All right. So let's talk about this. And let me say this on the front end. When it comes to battling this area that we're looking at today, which is what we're talking about, burnout, battling burnout. Problem with burnout is that a lot of people aren't really battling it. They've kind of surrendered to it. It's a place, and it's something that's actually happening in their life. The interesting thing about burnout, though, is that there's some things when we look at people's lives that symptomatically, now, when I use the word symptom, let me give you kind of a caution right here on the front end, a disclaimer, okay? The disclaimer is, as coaches, we are not mental health professionals. We all understand that, right? I'm not in an advising mode. I am not a counselor. I am not a therapist. It's not what I'm actually trained to do. Having said that, there are plenty of people who can really not only benefit from a coach, but I'd say about 90% of people could actually be coached. There's 10% of people who have severe wounds and they need healing in their life, and they actually need to go see a therapist, right? But there are plenty of people who do not have all their ducks in a row. You know what percentage of people do not have all their ducks in a row? 100% of people. I don't have all my ducks in a row. You don't. Like, if we're honest about it, none of us have actually reached our potential. We're all under that, right? And so what that means is that there's plenty of people who are healthy enough to be coached, plenty of people who can become self-aware enough to step outside themselves in a coaching relationship and deal with some of the things that are not working perfectly, that aren't in alignment, that aren't helping positioning them to reach their potential or whatever. Burnout is one of those areas that I do think that if there's someone who has severely neglected themselves, that they absolutely need to go see a counselor or a therapist. Now, when I say symptoms and stuff like that, what we're looking for is, what are some of the things that can help you identify burnout compared to some of the other things? Because at first glance, a lot of times people think that burnout is exactly the same as being stressed out, but it's not really the same thing. I'm not trying to put you in diagnosis mode. I'm not trying to make you a counselor, a therapist, or anything else. So again, that's not what we do. What we are doing is one of the things that I teach in our coaching bootcamp, and we just had one about a week and a half ago, which was amazing. But one of the things that I talk about is what are we listening for? And listening is sometimes it's words, but sometimes it's sentences, but sometimes it's those things that are a little bit more subtle, that there are certain things that we can actually pay attention to. Because there's sometimes that people will say things and you're like, oh, this person's just stressed out, or this person has this going on in their life, or that's what it sounds like. But actually, some of the symptoms of burnout look a little bit different. Some of the signs of burnout look a little bit different. And so what I want to do is I want to compare and contrast these things really quickly so that you can what I want you to begin to understand is what to look for, so that if you're recognizing it in yourself or you're recognizing it in other people, now you know what it is and you can position yourself to actually help them. So here's what we're really talking about with regard to burnout. A lot of times when people say, I'm stressed and I'm stressed out, what we're really talking about is too much stress. What we're really talking about is that it's just too much. It's just this, and it's an overextension in that kind of way. There's just not enough. It's way too much pressure. When it comes to burnout, it's really a little bit different. What we're talking about is just simply not having enough. Having enough what? Well, there's just not enough. We're talking about expenditure and capacity. And honestly, burnout can happen just because of prolonged stress. And it doesn't have to be like when we think of stressed out and it's like, no, you think about a stressed out person, a burnout person is actually going to be a little bit like their emotional level, their energy level, and all of those things is actually going to be very different from a person who's just simply stressed out. I mean, here's another comparison and contrast. A person who's stressed out is overengaged. But you know what a person who is burnout is? They are disengaged. They're actually removing themselves. Like a person who's stressed out, man, they've got so much what I would call is almost hysteria. Like it's frenetic, everything that's going on. And they're the person who's probably sitting there and their phone's blowing up all the time, and they're always overly involved in work and all of those other things. Well, you know what's happening with a person who is burnout is that they actually are on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's when apathy begins to set in. When I say apathy, we're really talking about someone who has almost hysteria. And hysteria, I know, is an extreme word that I'm using here, but there's not a real good comparison and contrast as far as the antonyms with those words. But a person who's really stressed out and they were overly involved and they're overly emotionally involved in everything else, a person who's on the other end kind of gets to this point where they're kind of like, I can't bring myself to care anymore. And that's actually a slippery slope. Like that's a really dangerous place, especially if what's causing the issue in life, if the burnout is relational. Let's say that somebody is burnout relationally with their kids and with their spouse during this crazy season that we have all been in, which is post-COVID world. That could actually be a recipe for disaster inside of a family, inside of people who were completely in love with each other a couple of years ago, but changed different factors and move roles and everything else. And you could actually have someone who at a certain point is like, you know what? I just don't care anymore. And you kids can do whatever you want to do. And the house starts to look like everybody's doing what they want to do. I mean, you can really have someone who was so detailed and so involved at a certain point, and then all of a sudden they're just emotionally numb. And that's what we're really talking about. See, this is what you would say when we were going back to the XY axis and we talk about state of being. This is a person who's in most cases become pretty much emotionally numb. I mean, they're not happy and they're not mad. They're in some cases not even frustrated anymore. They have just kind of positioned themselves like, you know what? I'm withdrawing and I really don't care. So you also look at this person. They're not doing frenetic activity like a stressed out person would do. What they were actually doing is withdrawing from activity. This is a person who actually, in many cases, what ends up happening is that they're not taking on more responsibility. They're not even feeling over responsible for things. Actually, this person more than not is procrastinating in work and in a lot of different areas in life, because that's what burnout looks like. It literally looks like, you know what? When the batteries are drained in about every part of you, and it can take a person who at one time was pretty much like on their game, involved, engaged, like the best person that you could count on and everything else. And now this person moves from that, probably extreme. I'd even say that there's a lot of perfectionists who all of a sudden there is a pain or there's something that actually happens in their life. And it hits them at such a level that they're just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. I'm done caring. You might even hear somebody say something like that. You know what? And I don't know about you guys. Some of the things that's happened over the last year and a half with regard to how we've been governed in this. There's some people who are fighting every day. And then there were some people who were like, is my voice not being listened to anymore? And then all of a sudden they were just like checked out. And this is what we're talking about. Burnout is at a certain point being mentally and emotionally checked out. And so this person is physically exhausted, at least in the way that they are approaching life, but it's a little bit different. Like a person who's stressed out might be kept up at night because of what they're thinking about and what they're worrying about and this other thing. This other person who is burnout is just completely mentally and physically exhausted and checked out, like the batteries are low. And that's why it's like just as easy for them to sleep in as it is to do anything else. They might be sitting around in their pajamas. Their hygiene might go down a little bit. I'm not saying that this person has mental or emotional issues. I'm just telling you what that can begin to look like. And so what does burnout look and sound like, so that you can start to spot it? And let me say hi to a couple of more people in here, especially when they pop in and they say hi to me. I want to be able to do that. There's Tim, who from Indiana, looking forward to bowl season, college football bowl season, also looking forward to the holidays. Yes, I am excited about that as well. Even though my LSU Tigers are getting a bowl, it was kind of brutal, but I was literally looking at all that stuff this past weekend. Esme from South Africa, welcome. Let's see, who else do I need to say hello to? There's Angela, and there's Montague. How's it going? Tabitha, welcome. Very good. All right, so let's look at what some of the things are that we're going to actually, what burnout actually looks and sounds like. Burnout looks and sounds like, if you hear somebody say something like, nothing I do is appreciated, if this starts to become their mantra, could be the warning signs or the very beginning of someone really starting to hit burnout. This is the person who's in a work environment, and no matter what they do, it seems to go unnoticed. It seems to never be appreciated. As a matter of fact, at a certain point, they love doing things for people and really helping and being a contributor. But at a certain point, when they are taken advantage of, or they feel taken advantage of, this is something that you begin to hear. You might also hear this in a relationship where it's really unbalanced, it's really unhealthy, where a person is kind of taken advantage of at a certain point, and then all of a sudden there seems to be this stonewalling that starts to happen in this person, where they're just kind of like, you know what, I'm done, I'm checked out, I just don't feel like I can do this anymore, I'm exhausted, all of those things. Here's another thing that you might hear. You might hear someone say, what's the point? What is the point? What's the meaning? Is anything that I'm doing going towards anything bigger? What's the meaning? What's the point behind this? Now, here's the interesting thing, is that if you go back in time, if you've not been with us in any of this series at all, talked about some of these things with regard to motivation, talked about some of these things about people regaining control of their life. I would say that you could go back and revisit some of these things, because some of the concepts that I'm talking about you can draw from that to actually help someone who's processing these things, because some of the things sound similar. So some of those tips that I gave you can actually help. Here's another thing. You might hear someone say, I just don't care anymore. I can't bring myself to care anymore about this. And so what are they doing? You know what? They're just simply checking themselves out. Here's another one though that maybe you've heard. And it'd be interesting if you guys throw in the comments if you've heard this, or maybe you've actually said this yourself. If you start noticing that someone is skipping work, or they're suddenly really late for work. Now, here's the thing, is that there's some people who have character issues that they'll skip work, or they'll show up to work late, or they will leave early. And they've always been that person. What we're talking about is a person who this is not who they really are. That's the bigger thing behind accountability. I always teach this in our boot camp, is that accountability is account for your ability. We're talking about who someone truly is, the essence of a person. And when somebody starts behaving differently, when they have different actions that are happening in their life, kind of out of nowhere in some of these things, it's when they're actually, like in the workplace, it's when they've kind of got to this point where, you know what, the work doesn't have meaning, the work doesn't have purpose, they feel devalued, they don't feel very affirmed, they don't have meaning and purpose that's actually connected with their work. And at a certain point, the batteries are so drained that it's like, you know what, it's almost like that procrastination even in work starts to happen. Might have even been a person who used to take on all kinds of responsibility and go way above and beyond. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm not raising my hand to volunteer and do anything at work anymore. I'm just not going to care what any of the people that I work with anymore. I'm not going to care. I'm not going to offend anybody, and I'm not going to be mean. I'm not going to be a jerk, and I'm not going to be angry because I don't feel any of those things. Matter of fact, it's going to work and you're like, I just don't have any emotions in this at all. And I just simply don't care. And so I'm not going to put myself out there anymore. But at the same time, I would say if it's a person who really wants to be the best and they were truly great before, there's a deep dissatisfaction that's in that. They're just kind of, you know, what happens sometimes, it's just easier to disassociate than to care anymore. People do it relationally all the time as well, because I can guarantee you, if somebody's hitting burnout, they're also isolating themselves relationally as well. Especially those relationships that require any degree of accountability in their life. The people who are living in this place right now are kind of in avoidance. They're really withdrawing because, you know what? If they know that where they're living is not the best, they're not really, listen, they're not feeling great about life because they're not really feeling anything. But the easiest thing for someone to be able to do is to almost create an atmosphere, create a culture around them where no one knows them, no one expects anything from them anymore. And so isolation is just a really easy thing. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm not going out anymore, not answering my phone anymore. I'll respond to text or I'll leave text on unread so that people will know that I didn't necessarily get the message and I haven't seen it. That way I don't have to be responsible and I don't have to be accountable. This is something that pretty much for every burnt out person that's out there, vast majority are withdrawing from relationship and withdrawing from any accountability that's in their life. And here's another thing that you'll see that becomes very common is that this person has grown cynical and they've grown pessimistic. So one of the things that I said earlier is that there's a certain degree of apathy, but there's also a certain degree that, you know what, world's not any better. World's getting worse. My life's not going to get any better. This doesn't have any purpose. And one of the things that a lot of times people will trick themselves into not caring, is to kind of make jokes about stuff, to kind of be critical, and sometimes to be critical of a group of people, to be critical of the people at work, to be critical of family and all this other stuff. It's kind of a certain amount of self-righteousness where you're kind of like, you know, I'm not going to care because these people don't care, but they don't care more. And it's because they don't have their crap together that I'm actually going to withdraw myself. And I will say this: apathy, cynicism, pessimism, they're killers. They are killers in life. They're killers of dreams, and they make somebody completely stuck. So this sounds like a big mountain that I have created here. And so what I will really want to do very quickly, now again, I'm not going into great excessive detail on all of this stuff. And part of the reason why is because it would take a really, really long time to actually, like, we could actually take burnout and we could probably do a whole series, and maybe I'll do that in the future. Maybe we'll have like 6 weeks just related to burnout. What I want to do is hit the high points and give you some ways of being able to recognize it, and then what can you actually do to help your client. So let's talk about how we actually help them address it. Number one is to help them regain a sense of control. And what we did a couple of weeks ago, I think actually last week, I talked about victim powerlessness and how that actually affects people. And what do you do to help someone get a sense of autonomy and control in their life? It's a powerful motivator in life. Now, here's the interesting thing, and this is how I'm grabbing some of these things of how you actually battle. There is a individual, and we'll talk about them in a second, that created a burnout inventory, and it's the Maslow burnout inventory. And what she did is that she really highlighted about 6 different factors that you typically see in a person that are kind of like, particularly in the workplace, of what are signs of burnout or possible burnout coming. So when I'm talking about how we help them battle, because that's the truth, is that some people aren't even battling it. They're just kind of like, you know what? That's the worst part about it, is that you just kind of like sit there disengaged. To battle it, we have to actually know what is actually creating the issue so that we can address it and that we can actually set goals around these kinds of things. So I'm not going to elaborate on this one, but you can go back a week and talk about what I said about helping people regain a sense of control in their life. It's literally last week's talk, so I won't talk about it. That's going to be the first thing. Second thing is help people get clear about their values. Help them get clear and get in touch about what matters most. Because sometimes the easy thing to do to pretend like to go into apathy and cynicism and pessimism is it's really a disassociation sometimes from where pain is and what matters most. And there's nothing worse than living a life where not only do you not know what you care or what you're supposed to care about, but when you do know what you're supposed to care about and you're pretending not to care about it because you don't want to go there, you feel like you don't have any energy. One of the things that we can do as coaches is to help people. Again, we're in COVID funk area. What are we wanting to do? Is that we're wanting people to get back in touch with what are the real priorities and what matters most right now. Because I understand, like, I've probably had at least a couple of times in my life, I'm 47 years old. I've had a couple of times in my life where I was just kind of like burnout, and there were various reasons, but I've been made to be a passionate person. Like, that really is who I am. That's in my deepest wiring, is to be passionate, full of life and everything else. And what that meant in those moments, what were some of the things that brought me back to life? One of the biggest things that brought me back to life was getting in touch with what is most important to me. Where do I find meaning? Where do I find passion? What are the things that actually light me up? See, here's the interesting thing, is that sometimes the things that knock us off are the great disappointments that we come up against in the biggest areas of passion in our life. And what we have to do is that we have to confront the disappointment. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes there's loss and all of that. And we have to actually process that really well, because it's actually the values in those things that are meant to give us our why behind our why. Determines how we do things and what's really most important. And listen, that's what actually makes us most human, right? That's actually what truly sets us apart from all of creation, is that I don't think that my dog is thinking very much about what's most important in her life besides getting food. Like, that seems to be the number one priority. And you know what? Once food and safety and shelter gets taken care of, there are intrinsic values. There's something, what I would say is that there's a due north in our life that we're actually supposed to be drawn towards, that its value and purpose actually point at each other. Value, passion, and purpose actually kind of converge together to put us on a trajectory towards those things. So that's why we have to get connected, stay connected to those things. Here's the third thing. The third thing is that we've got to create a system of feedback. Again, there's so many people who feel this underappreciation, or they feel this sense that I'm not really doing any better. Am I actually better than I was before? Am I making progress? Is there anything of value and worth in me? Listen, there's a lot of people who are never going to have workplaces that reflect in that kind of a way. A lot of times people are around other people who are negative and pessimistic and cynical themselves. So when they're in those kinds of environments all the time, most people never have a mirror that's held up to say, look at the greatness that you're walking into. Look at what you've overcome. Look at what you've grown into. Look at who you are now compared. Look at how you're acting. Look at how you've challenged yourself to become this. It's something that is the dynamic of a coaching relationship. Is feedback is the lifeblood of a coaching relationship. And it's something that we can begin to bring, especially when people don't have it in other areas of their life. 4 is to help them set boundaries, because part of the reason why people get burnt out and get all messed up in the first place is that they didn't have boundaries to begin with. They didn't have boundaries at work. They didn't have boundaries with relationships, with friends, with family. Sometimes even with their spouse and with their kids, they didn't set boundaries. And so usually they got offended before they started stonewalling people, because they felt like at a certain point, in many cases, that they were being taken advantage of. And I don't want anybody doing something when they are being taken advantage of. But what I would say is that it was the boundary. It's a lot of times people feel offense because they look at someone, and let me say, offense is a huge killer in life. I don't have time to go into it, but let me say this. Someone who is offended is about to hit a wall. Absolutely. In relationships, and there's only a matter of time before people are going to withdraw. Now, offense, when someone was starting to feel something, is the time that they needed to address it, and they needed to set boundaries. But people just keep going past it, and they keep moving. So it's the person who leaves their phone on all day long for anybody to interrupt anything that's going on in their life or whatever is a priority. That friend or family member who can interrupt and do anything that they want, who can pull them out of whatever errands they had to run for the day for themselves to go all the way across town to do something else. It's the person who works in a workplace, and they allow the workplace to text and to call them after hours when they're not getting paid anymore, to address emails, to be on the weekend and get called to pull up some report or to run something in that somebody else forgot. See, what has to happen is there has to be a cutoff point where people, like, if you need to leave your laptop in your car, if you need to lock it up in your trunk, if you need to turn your phone off completely, if you need to even tell people the boundaries that you have in your life. Hey, some of you guys are coaching other people. Are you allowing your clients just to text and call whenever they want? Are they just sending emails? You're not getting paid for any of this stuff. Like, that's one of the things that makes stuff offensive, is that when you are having something taken from you and there's not an even exchange. There's plenty of people who like to help other people, but when it is one-sided at a certain point, there's going to be exhaustion. There's going to be overextension. There's going to be offense that starts working in someone's heart. And so what we've got to do is that we've got to help our clients begin to look at their life and say, okay, this problem wasn't really somebody else causing this problem. The problem was me and what I choose and why I didn't set boundaries to begin with. Here's 5, is that you've got to help them create a goal for community. Now, I have thoughts. I have passionate thoughts about community. I'm not going to argue or try to convince somebody of what I believe community should look like for every person who's around. But what we have to do is that people who are in burnout, in most cases, have isolated themselves, and they are in negative or unsupportive relationships, and they've got to create a community. They've got to seek community. I don't want to leave it up to someone who's just kind of like, well, you know, I've tried and there's just nobody out there. That's bull crap. You can find people in your life. You know what? It might not be in the settings and in the community where you're looking currently right now. I had to find the types of community that I was looking for. And if I was going to get to the next level, I actually had to begin to find people who are at the next level who I could spend time with. Now, here's the interesting thing is that back in the days when I was just starting out, like many of you know my story, we lost everything in 2007. I was working for a company at that time, got laid off, and it was a disaster. We lost like everything. But there was an assumption probably in me that people who were living at the level that I wanted to go to probably didn't have any time for me and probably would look at me in my life as though I was a loser and I'm just, I'm down here or whatever. Here's the interesting thing is that I found people who were and I'm not just talking about wealth. I'm talking about in various areas of their life where they just had things that I wanted to live into. But the reality is that those people think a different way. They relate to their life in a different way. Their faith looks different. There's all of these things that are actually different. What I actually found was that when I tried to make an approach, a lot of those people actually befriended me. I was shocked. Like, here I'm a nobody and I have nothing to contribute to your life. But because I was actually seeking them out and I was looking for those things, I actually, before I had any success in my life, anything that anybody would determine as success, I started getting invited into the inner circle with various people that I'm like, I should not be at this meeting right now. If I was a fanboy, I would be taking a picture right now and posting it on my social media, but I can't even take a picture. I'm almost afraid to tell my friends who I'm sitting across from having coffee right now, because they're going to get envious because they don't quite understand this thing. Like, I can remember sitting at those kinds of meetings. What am I saying in this? I'm saying that you can build any kind of community that you want, and you can seek support and you can seek relationships. But sometimes it means that you're going to have to go outside of where you're currently relating right now. Hey, if you're dissatisfied with the relationships that you have right now, you have a choice. You can either upgrade those relationships and call people to a higher level, maybe a couple of them, or you're going to have to seek new relationships. And you know what? You're probably going to be uncomfortable in those places because you haven't arrived yet in those areas. They're going to be relationships that inspire you, and you're going to probably feel a little bit vulnerable, like you don't bring anything to the table. But this is the way that we find relationships that are life-giving. You have to go to the culture where you thrive. Sometimes you can't grow where you're planted. Sometimes you have to uproot yourself and replant yourself in a place that gets sufficient sun, that gets sufficient nutrients, that is in a dynamic that is already fully alive and thriving. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with moving on. There's nothing wrong with sometimes saying, you know what, I love this person and these relationships are great, but they're going to take this portion of life right now because I've got to seek relationships where there's support, where there's accountability, and there's people who are actually pressing and they want more out of life. Okay. Now, here's the last thing that I'm going to say, and it's just another resource for you to look at. One thing that you can do is you can help someone take a real assessment. In the Maslow burnout inventory measures these three categories. Now, she's like the genius in this area. There's other inventories out there, but she's brilliant. You can get information about this, but it really measures these three key areas. Exhaustion. It actually measures cynicism, like what's a person's attitude, the way that they look at things. And this other part is when somebody sees themselves in the workplace as whether or not what they are doing is actually contributing to something bigger and more meaningful. So those key areas that I was just actually covering, what this is going to do is that if somebody actually takes this assessment, maybe you're a person who needs to take this assessment. When you do it, what it does is that it shows you out of those major factors, where is the biggest pain point? Where are the places that you should go to be able to address things? And so tools and assessments, what I look at them, even if you're not a professional on the tool or assessment, what it can do is somebody can take the assessment and you can coach them around it and then set goals based on real scientific data rather than just kind of like speculating. What you can do is, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't you take this assessment? Give me a copy of the results. I'm going to review it. And then let's set some goals out of that, because here's our guidelines. Here's some of the structure that we can utilize to help you. Now, let me pay the bills really quickly. And I want to say hello to a few people. For those of you who have not gotten trained and certified, let me get you reconnected with your purpose. If it's in your heart, it's in your blood to help other people, and you've been putting this off, here's the thing. we have a few weeks before the first of the year. Some of you probably thought you would have gotten trained and certified before now, especially like last year when a lot of you weren't having to go to work. You know, they were like, stay at home, wash your hands, and we will pay you. Some of you who had the luxury of that really should have gotten this knocked out by then. And some of you probably were like, I know for sure I'll be trained and certified as a coach before 2022. 2022 is just a couple of weeks away, right? Christmas is here. Make a line in the sand today and give yourself a Christmas gift of actually getting trained and certified before the first of the year. Our boot camp is really, in my opinion, the best bang for your buck to be able to do that, because you get training and certification that's included. The life coach certification course, and your certificate, social media integration tool, ID lookup, lifecoachmatch.com listing, all of those things are included, but you also get access to our boot camp. Now, the next boot camp is going to be in February as far as the live one, but you have access to all the replays that go all the way back to like April of 2020. You can actually get access to that in about 90 seconds after you enrollment. It's our famous 90-second enrollment. You really can't get enrolled that quickly. Also, the Jumpstart program itself is about 40 core modules that give you the A to Z on how to build your business. Whether you're going to be a traditional coach, a hybrid coach, so you're getting clients locally, but also online, or if you want to be a fully online coach, we'll give you the steps to be able to do that. Everything from how do you discover your target market, your niche, how to sell, how to attract clients. We give you a model we call the Explosive First Coaching Session, and it's a template designed to show you how to basically knock the socks off of someone in that first coaching session so that you demonstrate that you can help them get results. Everything is covered in there, tons of tools, literally hundreds of hours of training that we have done. Additional training, because I go live every week with our group coaching call. You can ask any question during that call. You also can give us anything that you want us to review and give feedback on, whether it's your website or whatever. Another thing that Jumpstart includes, you see there that we have Brand Camp for Coaches. It's about 13 hours worth of training that helps you not only discover your niche, but it also helps you put your messaging together. Each component of your messaging that you're going to use on social media, that you're going to use on your website. We also give you a bunch of website tools, give you a wireframe for how to build a website that actually converts, and not only brings in clients, but also that you're opting people in, maybe to email and stuff like that. We show you how to write an email, how to write website copy, all that, search engine optimization. All of that stuff is actually included just in that one component called Brand Camp. All of these things are included inside of Jumpstart for only $97 a month. It's the cost of Starbucks, $3.25 a day. Most schools do not even touch the business side of things and charge you thousands of dollars just for training and certification. You get everything for $97 a month with a 3-month minimum commitment. You can cancel after 3 months, but if you want to stick around, it's a great price point, and you can stay with us for as long as you need to. But this is the investment that we ask you to make in yourself to help you become successful. If you start now, you can get trained and certified by January, and there's no reason why you couldn't have your business up and going in a real accelerated way by about March. January, though, is the number 2 month of the entire year. You can sign clients left and right without even great messaging or anything else, because people are so ready for a new year and to actually work on themselves. So it makes a lot of sense that if today is the 13th, that you knock this out so that you can begin getting clients even in January, because it's low-hanging fruit. Like that's one of the easiest months of the year to actually get clients, because people are just ready. It's like, can I find a coach? Can I actually work on my goals? Can I actually get started in something? And we can actually help them accomplish those things. Let me look over here really quickly at any of our anything that anybody is saying over here. Let's see. I just want to say hello to anybody else who wants to say hello. People are talking about vaccines on here. I don't think that I talked about vaccines, but that's fine. Hey, does anybody have any questions about anything that we're talking about today? And if not, we will head out for the day. Anyone? No? I'll give it about 15 seconds because you guys are about 30 seconds ahead of me. All right. Well, listen, take a look inside the description. There is a link there that you can get more information about Jumpstart, and you can get enrolled. And again, in about 90 seconds. Listen, I appreciate you guys all immensely. Have a great rest of your week and take care.